Adam Kerrigan, one of my favorite people, the energy. I had the great pleasure of knowing Adam for, I don't know, a couple of years now. And he's just got such great energy, such a great disposition about him. He's driven, direct, and open minded are his three core values, which are very, very true. Adam holds many records in powerlifting. Do you know the difference between powerlifting and weightlifting? I did not. We start with that conversation, but he holds world records in it. He also started a tech firm, a managed service provider, an MSP firm, and then sold it. Talk about the many transitions there. As you know, I love the tech industry, love managed service providers as a former one myself. Great conversation with Adam, and now he helps MSPs and small businesses transition to get acquired, to get what we call mergers and acquisition. But it's a really, really great conversation with Adam. He's got so much insight. And do you know that people can be married on a helicopter? Thanks for listening. Hi, I'm Joey Pinz, and here's my 45-second introduction. After starting my business in the 90s, I started developing poor habits of eating in my diet because I was working way too much. Before you know it, I found myself 340 pounds. The doctor told me if I don't lose the weight, I'm not going to see my daughter graduate. Took the next 7 months, lost 130 pounds. People think there's some secret. Ask me, how'd you lose that weight? Like there's some secret. There is no secret. How'd I lose the weight? Just one word: discipline. I've had other successes in life, and I attribute them all to discipline. Now, I'm not the king of discipline, but I believe that it can help all of us. Friends, colleagues convinced me to start a podcast. The podcast mission: how do we better ourselves and society? I talk to interesting people in health, fitness, sport, wellness, business, technology, science, art, and culture. And I eventually ask them how discipline plays a role in their life. Podcast vision: growth through learning from others. Adam Kerrigan, thank you so much for your time today. So what are some of the misconceptions out there about having a world weightlifting record?
Well, that's the first one. It's not weightlifting, it's powerlifting.
Look at that. It's powerlifting. Look at that. Look what I did. And the difference
So,
between the two?
so weightlifting is commonly associated with Olympic weightlifting, where these guys, they do like the clean and jerk, the snatch. It's kind of overhead movements. Powerlifting is a specific sport where it involves three events: the squat, the bench press, and the deadlift. Just those three. And yeah, it's my hobby.
And you hold the world record in what?
So I hold a world record deadlift, 622.8 pounds.
600.
Yeah, and it's such an odd number because it's actually in kilograms. I forget the kilos
Oh, it's
because
in kilos.
the U.S. is the only one that does it in pounds. The entire world does it in
Of
kilos,
course.
and I forget. I want to say it's like I don't know, one. No, I don't even want to guess. I'm going to guess the kilos wrong, but 200 and some kilos.
Wow. And
Yeah.
before you did this on stage in front of everybody was recorded, had you gone higher than that?
Actually, no. I set that last year. I want to say it was in July at the national championships, and that was the first time I'd ever personally deadlifted that amount.
Wow.
Not even in the gym. Like I just went all out. I felt like I had it in the tank, and so I went for it and amazed myself that I got it. So,
And you beat your personal record by how much?
um, let's see. If I remember correctly, I held the record at 614, so I improved it by like 8 pounds, and it stands today.
So you paint a picture for me, Adam. So you
Sure.
there's lots of, I mean, it's a big competition. You break the
Yeah.
record, lots of applause happens. You walk off the stage, what happens?
So, oh man, dude, my adrenaline's pumping
Of
through
course.
me, right? So you're on the platform alone, and there's lights shining on you. There's cameras. There's the audience. My wife was just off to the right, videotaping me, video recording
I say
me.
the same thing. Yeah.
Uh, my training partners were off to the stage right of the platform, and I hit it, and that was my very final lift of the meet, because for each, the squat, bench, and the deadlift, you get 3 attempts.
Hmm.
And so the first attempt is something that you can do, right? And we look at it like, hey, this is something you should be able to hit for a triple. And then, but that last lift, the adrenaline was just coursing through me. It was also the first time that I successfully got all 9 lifts. So we call
Wow.
that a perfect meet. That was my first time ever. Um, I had also set a personal record in my squat, which was 540. I tied my personal best in competition for bench, which is 385, and then I pulled that 622. And so I also we call our total when we add all those together. Let's see, 540, 385 plus 622. So 1547 was my total. That was
Wow.
also a personal best. So that was like a perfect meet, 3 personal record. It was like the best meet I think of my entire career, and I ended up taking 3 gold medals in nationals as well as setting that world record.
The
So
other
that
gold medals are in
that
what?
to me was like the best.
Oh
Like
my God.
that
Yeah.
was the best meet. Yeah,
How could it can't be better?
I know. I should have retired then, but now at the top. But we're like, it's gonna be better next time, right? I want to taste of this. It's so good. Yeah, yeah. So that was that I was on cloud nine.
You wearing a belt when you're powerlifting?
Yeah, so I do. It's completely optional, but I wear it when I squat and when I deadlift. And I don't know if most people realize, but what it does is when you're bracing your abdomen, your trunk, you're kind of pushing out, right?
Mm,
And what the belt does is it just creates a force to press out against.
I see.
So it doesn't necessarily allow lifters to lift more. It just allows us to lift safely.
Hmm. Everybody uses chalk?
It's very common. Yeah, there's a big bowl of chalk. You get it all over your hands, uh, and it becomes very messy. I always pity the cleanup crew.
Hmm.
After we come through, and then what they don't show you, what the audience doesn't see, is what we call nose torque. So yeah, yeah, I see the reaction on your face. So uh, in the bowl there are these little um, there's these little glass, I don't even know what you call it, little capsules that you break, and it's ammonia. And basically, and people have probably seen this. They see people sniffing this,
Yeah.
and what it does is when you sniff that, and it's very powerful. It's like like when you jump in a pool and you kind of hit that chlorine smell.
Mm.
It dumps adrenaline into your system, and it only lasts about 30 to 60 seconds, but it's kind of a way to intentionally exert and use like the full potential of your natural system.
Hmm.
um, it itself doesn't really give us anything. It just allows us to tap into that adrenaline, which then we go out there. And so the rules state that you're supposed to do that out of the view of the audience. um, but every now and again, people might catch a glimpse.
I've heard of like strong smelling salts that
Yes.
MMA.
Yep.
I didn't. So it's the same thing.
It's the same thing. Yeah, in a medical capacity, it's kind of what they might use to wake somebody up.
Mm.
But it's all smelling salts. But yeah, the nickname we call it is nose torque. But yeah, it really just it gives you a hit. It dumps adrenaline into your system, and then it really allows you to kind of fully just become almost animalistic in your strength.
Wow. And the deadlift, are you thumbs? You hooking using your thumbs?
Yeah, so I use what is called hook grip. So there's a couple of ways that some people do it, but some people will do an alternating grip.
Right.
Essentially, in the deadlift, when you get to a certain level, your grip will be the weakest link. The
Mm.
further a muscle is away from your core, the
Hmm.
weaker it is.
Hmm.
And so, what is weakest is our hands. And
Mm.
actually, fun fact: there's no muscles in your fingers. Most
Hmm.
people don't realize that. The muscles are all in our forearms. These are just tendons in here. So anyway, uh,
Hmm.
that's the science nerd in me. But anyway,
Yeah.
our grip is the weakest, so we hold an alternating grip. If we hold like this, the bar tends to roll out of our hands. But I
Mm.
do a hook grip, so I actually crush my thumb under the bar and I hook my finger around it. And so all that weight, that 622 pounds, sitting right on my thumb.
Wow.
And what it does is it just digs into the bar. it took about a year to start training that. It was extremely painful, and you probably wouldn't pick them up, but my thumbnails have these white marks all along the insides from just bending when I train. But
Wow.
it's just, yeah, it's just one of the little techniques of training, and a lot of people don't like it because of the pain. But once you get used to it, it's just like anything else.
And it's not the smooth part of the bar, it's actually
It's the
graded.
knurling.
Yeah, the
Yes, yeah.
knurled,
So
yeah,
it's where it's gripped. It's called
yeah.
knurling, right? And it's kind of this very aggressive grip that allows you to really hold the bar and just you know it allows some bite, right? And I mean it hurts. I mean we get big calluses on our hands
Yeah.
build up from training, um, but in the moment during the lift, it's one of my favorite places to be is on the platform,
Hmm.
because I kind of shut out. There's people yelling and clapping and kind of cheering for you. I don't hear any of it. Um, my vision kind of narrows. There's three judges. There's two on the sides and one in the front, the head judge, and they're kind of giving you the commands. And I just see them. It's very odd, and it's a kind of phenomenon that a lot of people experience. They just get in that zone, and that's all they see. And then even sometimes we actually like mentally blank out the lift. Like we'll
Hmm.
complete the lift and we'll walk off the platform, and we're like, I don't even remember doing the lift. It's
Wow.
it's just kind of this odd experience where we're just in the zone.
You hear athletes talk about that where they don't remember what happened, they don't hear the
Mm.
applause, they just focus on that. It's very, now do you have that same kind of feeling when you went skydiving recently?
That oh yeah, so that was about 2 weeks ago, first time ever, and I went back to back. Uh, I I felt very aware.
Hmm.
I was soaking that up, and it was brand new experience. I thought I had an idea of what to expect, right? And it went by very quickly.
Hmm.
Uh, so there's we're and see, I thought how it was is we're in this little rickety plane, right? We're up there, and I'm thinking that I'm going to sit on the edge, and then the tandem, the guy that's jumping, he's hooked to me in the back. Um, well, I was wrong. I wasn't sitting. I was actually hanging off the
Right.
plane, and he's the one sitting on the edge, right? And I'm
Yeah,
just
yeah.
like standing there, feet dangling. I'm looking down at the desert. I did it here in Las Vegas, and you can't hear anything because the wind's just
Hmm.
blowing,
Hmm.
and then just suddenly you're supposed to look up, and then you just fall out of the plane, and so you're free falling. And what I thought it would be like is, that roller coaster feeling, right?
Yeah.
Your stomach and your throat sort of a thing for the entire time. But what happens is your body actually catches up, and you kind of hit this I forget what they call it, that speed, the speed where that's as fast as you're going to fall.
Hmm.
And it takes about 5 seconds. And once you're there, then you're good. The feeling
Right.
goes away. You're getting, of course, blasted with the air and everything. And for about 30 seconds, we're in free fall. And he had me turn this way and turn that way, and then before I knew it, he pulled the ripcord, and the chute comes flying up, and my feet go flying up, and
Right.
yeah, and then we just coast. He handed me the little thing, so I'm going like this, and then I'm going like that, and uh, I will say the first of the two jumps, I don't know if it's because I'm bigger or whatever, but we came into the landing zone hot,
Hmm.
and we overshot it, and we're in the desert, and they had this kind of nice gravelly area where we're supposed to land. Um, but he yells out from behind me as we miss it. He's like, "Oh shit!" And I'm thinking, this is not what I want to hear my
No, no.
instructor say it, as we overshoot it and we go straight into these rocks and bush. And the guy was so professional, because I'm thinking, oh man, I'm gonna get messed up. But he completely protected me. He kind of used his own body, to tuck underneath me. I didn't have
Wow.
a scratch on me. Unfortunately, he had his hands completely tore up.
What?
Yeah, bleeding, and I mean it was bad. But he was extremely professional, took great care of me, made sure I was okay, and yeah, and so. we went back, and I was like, you know what? This guy really did me solid. I want to jump with him again. So he had to patch his hands up, but then we went back out and did the second jump.
Wow.
Yeah.
And you said you actually had to lose weight to do this.
I did. Yes. So to jump, I had to weigh with clothes on and everything under 250. And, as I'm 6'2". Generally, for most of my life, I've walked around about 350. Well, after I sold my MSP and kind of went on my journey, I lost a ton of weight, and I've hovered around 280, 290, 300. And so I knew for my 44th birthday I wanted to go jump,
Hmm.
and so I knew I had to get under that limit. So started cutting weight, and I don't know about you, but I enjoy food. Well, I know
A little bit.
I know
I've
a little bit
eaten with
about
you
Joe.
before.
That's right. You
Triple
remember that
meat,
salad?
triple meat salad.
Triple meat salad. That's right. At the old pepper mill.
At
That's
the
right.
Peppermill in
That's
Vegas.
right.
That's
They,
right.
they should have
Yeah.
just brought us one of those things.
You're right. You're right. It was a lot of protein. It was a
Yeah.
lot. I went skydiving on my 50th birthday 6 years ago, and it
Oh, I didn't
was
know.
yeah, it was so great. It was one of the
So you
best
know what I'm
things.
talking about.
Yeah, it was fun. I remember. I think I told you this, but as we were setting up, they were so professional. We did it in Connecticut, in the Northeast. But
Mm.
standing up, and he's putting my gear on, and he's down on his knees, kind of waist high, and he says to me, "Is all the furniture away from the walls?"
Yeah. And you're like, huh?
I said,
Ah. Yeah.
"Ah, yes, yes. There's plenty of room." Between the furniture and the walls.
Yeah.
But yeah, we went up, and it was, about 15,000 feet. And I remember him saying, "Okay, we're going to go off on three, one," and then boom. Three never happened,
Yeah.
but yeah, like you said, you just kind of get used to it after a few seconds. And then,
Hmm.
he pops it up, and we went down, and
Yeah.
oh God, it was just, it's so, so cool, and such a rush.
Yeah.
And you like it up there because you got married in a helicopter.
I did. I did, man. You got all the deets on me. I did. Yeah. Last December, next month will be 1 year. Um, Here in Las Vegas. Who even knew, Joe, you could get married in a helicopter, like in
Yeah,
the helicopter up over the strip. Like I didn't know that was a thing
over the
until,
strip.
my wife is, my now wife, girlfriend at the time, she's like, how would you like to get married in a helicopter? And I was like, that's a thing. I was like, let's go. When do we do this? So yeah, so it was me, her, we had a videographer, obviously the pilot, and the person to do the ceremony, and that was it. So yeah,
No other couples?
no other couples, just us. Yeah, and we eloped.
Wow, you didn't tell
Didn't even tell
anybody.
my kids. Nobody
Really?
knew. Nobody knew, and we're like, oh, we got to get the pictures. That's how we're gonna tell people.
Hmm. And of course, I have to ask, this is Vegas,
Yeah.
but the person who was marrying you was an Elvis impersonator?
Sadly, no.
Ah,
That
it's
would, that would be the very top. So I tell you what, Joe, if I ever get married again,
yeah, yeah,
oh,
yeah. Oh, that is very, very cool. And you're up there for how long?
so they have a planned route, and I want to say that we're up there 20 minutes,
Huh.
maybe 30 at the most. I mean, that one, it was so cool because it was also the first time I'd ever been in a helicopter.
Ah.
So I'm trying to take in the whole experience, and you've got your headset on, and and she's in the background, and she's talking about uh, this and that, and oh, and love and all this stuff. And I'm just like, there's so much experience kind of coming in together. I'm sitting next to my beautiful wife. She's in her
Mm,
wedding dress.
mm.
I was in a Nike tracksuit. It was
Nice.
so anyway.
Good for you.
Uh,
When did you start the managed service provider company, the MSP company?
yeah. So I started my company in 2009, right in the middle of the Great Recession after
Yeah,
I lost my job.
that's
Uh,
right.
I'd been in corporate IT for 10 years. They eliminated the department due to budget shortfalls, and I was like, well, I got to do something. So yeah, 2009
And
started
had
it
you
up.
had any clients yet?
Uh, well, it's actually funny. So my first client was the two managers above me of the place that fired me.
Ah,
But I very quickly realized, look, I got to make some moves here. So I ended up buying a book of business from a good friend of mine
I see.
who, back in those days, well, at least for me, it was all break fix,
Hmm.
right? And was actually doing residential and commercial service. Those were the days. But look, we all get our start somewhere.
Yeah, yeah, residential was always a tough one because
Mm.
people don't wanna pay and,
Oh,
whereas company yeah, it's, "Why'd you take so long?" And yeah, very, very different kind of market. So you buy a book of business and
yeah,
eventually you keep growing, and that was
yeah.
2009.
Yeah. Yeah. Start
And
start growing, hiring staff. I hired my first technician. It's kind of the classic E-myth, right? You
right.
hire the person to do the books, right?
Mm,
And then you hire another technician, and then you hire another and you kind of start doing this. And I made some of the classic mistakes of, instead of delegating, I was abdicating, like take this
mm,
hat off, like, oh, I never have to worry about that again. I
mm,
know and trust they're going to take care of it perfectly, just like I would. And then you come back, it's a complete disaster, right? So
mm.
then I'm like, well, now I can't trust everybody. Now I got to do everything again. And unfortunately got kind of caught in that mentality,
Yeah.
for the 10 years I had it.
Were you weightlifting at the same time, Adam? Or
No,
powerlifting, excuse me.
no, not at all. I that it's actually the period where I was struggling the most. I was just consistently putting on weight, and that was, eating was my coping mechanism for the stress,
Mm,
and just slowly, steadily gained weight over those 10 years. And it wasn't until 2 years before I sold. So I sold in 2018, but it was in 2016 that I really decided to do something about my health, because I had a near drowning accident at
that's right.
Lake Mead
That's
because I was in
right.
such bad shape.
You're out recreational, having a good time, and then, things
Yeah,
got bad.
yeah. So I'd taken my son out camping with some friends, and we were in a area of Lake Mead that was designated for swimmers. And they had this way out, you know, they had this line of buoys that kind of marked like segmented the swimmers from the boats and the jet skis and all that other stuff. And I was like, I'm going to swim out to that line of buoys just to do something, right? So I swam out there, and I was kind of huffing and puffing, and I was like, wow, that was a good swim. And I kind of, all right, now I'm out here. What am I going to do? Well, I'm going to swim back now, right? So I turn around and I look at the beach, and it looks like it's a mile away.
Wow.
And I'm thinking like, oh no. So I start swimming back, and I'm so out of shape, super overweight. This was probably the most physical activity I'd had in years. I start cramping up, and I
Mm.
literally start going under, and I'm just struggling. And I was in Boy Scouts as a kid, and I took all the swim merit badges
Hmm.
and all that stuff. Completely forgot it all.
Wow.
And it was so wild because as I was going under, as I'm cramping up, I'm literally thinking, this is it. I'm dead, right?
Wow.
And I didn't even yell for help, because
Really?
I realized in my head, I was like, by the time they get out to me, I'll be dead. I'll be under the water, drowned.
Hmm.
And it's kind of cliche, people say, "Oh, your life flashes before your eyes." Well, mine actually did. And for me, I was literally seeing pictures of my kids, and I thought this was it. And somewhere in there, uh, I guess you could say I summoned the courage. I summoned the grit to say, I am not going to die here. I am absolutely going to make it through this, whatever it takes. And so I just somehow managed to doggy paddle, scramble my way back. And when I finally got to shore, my feet touched that sand, and I knew I was safe. And I just collapsed in the shallows out of pure exhaustion. And that for me was an enormous wake up call. I was like,
Wow.
I have lived my life too long in too unhealthy of a state.
Had others known what you had just transpired with you as you collapsed?
No, I actually, nobody knew. I didn't tell anybody. I was embarrassed. I
Hmm.
felt shame about it.
Hmm.
I felt, you know, I let myself get to this point,
Yeah.
and honestly, I felt like nobody would even believe me,
Hmm.
or take me seriously. But it was a dramatic, you know, terrifying moment in my life. And I'm, looking back, I'm glad, all things considered, that um, I think we have these turning points, right, in our life
Yeah.
where the right, the universe kind of things align
Mm.
for our benefit. And for me, it was one of those moments. So the very, I think it was the very next day, it was a Sunday, I'm at home and I tell my wife, hey, I'm going to go to the gym and sign up. And she's like, oh, here we go again. Because I'd done
Mm.
this before. I'd go and sign up, pay for the 3 years up front, go once, right?
Mm.
And she's like, sure, Adam, okay, have fun. So I went and I started going, and something just clicked inside of me. And I
Mm.
started going 7 days a week. I went for over an entire year, didn't miss a single day.
Wow.
And yeah, I was 36,
Hmm.
and it was the right combination.
And that's 2016. In 2018, you decide to sell the MSP. Any
Yeah,
coincidence there?
yeah. So for me, it was the coincidence was in spite of the health changes that I was making to my physical health, emotionally and mentally, I was still being crushed under the weight. I was
Mm.
failing to grow. Like I believe that a business is really capped by the owner, and when I, as an owner, had leveled out and topped out, that's it. The business was there, and it was growing, but it just, I was struggling to find good people. Kind of had this revolving door, and it wasn't growing like I really wanted or needed it to. And so I ultimately made the decision, like, I've got to make a change. And some and the right people, the right opportunity kind of presented itself, and so I made moves.
Hmm. And you made the exit. So you got an offer. You made the exit. Was it up for sale?
So it actually started. So in 2016, I ended up firing a client, and that client went out and found another MSP in the region, and I had heard of them, but I went out to personally handle the offboarding of the client. They were actually shocked that I even showed up, because
Hmm.
most of the time it's, when an
Right.
IT provider's out, they're out. And I was showing them around. I was showing them this server, and hey, there's this wireless access point behind this door and all that. They were really impressed that I even showed up. They said, Adam, you should really do lunch with our owner, Tom. This is a very rare thing. We appreciate you. So I went out and had lunch with Tom, forged a relationship. It was Intelligent Technical Solutions. They were like the 600-pound gorilla in Las Vegas.
Oh,
And so Tom
still
and I
is.
had lunch in 2016, started collaborating, started sending leads back and forth. And so over 2 years, we built a relationship. And then in 2018, he and I, again, were doing lunch, we're having sushi. And he's telling me about, he had done an acquisition in LA, he had done one in Phoenix.
Hmm.
And just on a whim, I said, hey, you ever think about buying anybody in Las Vegas? And he's like, well, are you selling? So
Hmm.
I was like, well, maybe I am. So I quickly, kind of, I ended up representing myself, big mistake there, but
Hmm.
went to market, got another offer, and ultimately felt ITS was the best fit in terms of offer, opportunity for myself, for my team, for my clients. And, you know, I'm now 6 years, actually just celebrated 2 weeks ago, my 6 year anniversary
Wow.
with ITS. And, it proved to be a fantastic choice.
Hmm. So when you're having sushi, do you order double meat there too? That's a joke, of course. So what advice
Uh,
do you have to MSPs that were you were in that area where, towards the end there where you're kind of partnering with some larger ones,
mhm.
and I talk to so many MSPs, I know you do too, Adam, was
Yeah,
that they're just kind of stuck, and they see what private
yeah.
equity is doing to the industry. They're not sure if they want to sell. I talked to somebody yesterday who was like, every once in a while legacy comes up, I'm going to leave it maybe to my kids. I mean, I know it's a different conversation, but when you talk to MSPs, you can bring a certain kind of light to it because you were
Hmm.
there, like myself. I
Yeah,
wonder, what's your advice to some of these MSPs that are, we're going to exit, right? Whether we like it or not. And
yes.
how should we do it?
Yeah, yeah, you're right. I mean, look, I think like Arlen says,
Yeah.
Arlen Sorensen, we're going to exit horizontally or vertically, right? It's up to us. Um, Look, I think this kind of goes to kind of a more core question is, and I've become really fascinated with this topic the last year or so, is if you think about literature in general, like business books and writing, there are hundreds, maybe even thousands of books written on how to start up a business successfully, right? you know, but there's almost nothing written on how to successfully exit.
Mm.
And certainly even less of what is written about how to exit, even less is written about figuring out what to do next. And
Mm.
I find that that's probably a really big thing that holds people back, is like, what am I going to do? Right. And I find in 9 out of 10 cases, at least of the people I talk to, like just this year alone, I've talked to over 300 MSP owners.
Wow.
And on this specific topic of M&A, is I would say 9 out of 10 are going to be in a position where their business is of such a size that if they were to sell it, it's going to get them some money, but it's unfortunately not quite enough for them to retire,
Mm.
right? And so what they're going to have to do is they're going to have to work for somebody else for at least a couple years.
Hmm.
And we call this the second bite of the apple, right? You sell your business, you take some chips off the table, and a portion of that payout you reinvest as equity into the bigger group. And over, say 3, 5, 7 years, it grows. That's your second bite, right? That you take. And so for a lot of these men and women that have been MSP owners, they've had decades, right? They're the CEO,
Mm.
they're the big wig, right? And now suddenly they have to take that hat off. They have to become an employee. They have to give up control. They have to separate themselves from the psychology that their business is them,
Mm.
you know, and that's a really big struggle. Um, so a complicated question
Yeah.
that you throw out there.
Yeah, it's because a lot of not just MSPs, small businesses, they start their small business and
Mhm.
it's their baby and
That's
they
right.
don't want, there's so many different delegation becomes a big issue in some of those younger times where I still work with some of these MSPs and they're still ordering the pizza. The CEO is still ordering pizza. You have to, delegation is very important.
Yeah.
You want to get things off the plate. And it's just you go through this evolution, and you get to a certain point after a
Mhm.
couple of decades, is like, if you're going to sell, how are you going to do it? And working for
Yeah.
somebody else scares a lot of them.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Their life is set up a certain way, right? They're used to making a certain amount of money. They're
Yeah.
used to being able to. And I think it's funny. They're like, Adam, I can come in and leave whenever I want. And I'm
Yeah.
like, yeah, but you're the one putting in the most hours, aren't you?
That's
You
right.
know?
Right. That's what ends
uh,
up.
but I think I'll speak for myself, and kind of the pattern that I tend to see is that I had done everything that I could. I had gone to Chartech, I'd done Robin Robbins,
Mm.
I'd hired coaches, I had poured hundreds of thousands of dollars into what I felt I needed to do. I'd read books and everything else that I felt would get me to the next level. And for whatever reason, it just wasn't clicking. And I was topped out for a couple of years. And the challenge is I see MSP owners and just small business owners in general that have been topped out for probably decades.
Mm.
And and I think the reality here is people got to get real with themselves,
Yeah.
right? We all have aspirations, we all have goals and everything, but it's like if you're going to achieve something different, what are you gonna do different?
Mm.
And if you're not, if you're just gonna keep going through the same motions, you're just fooling yourself, and that's okay. Like, hey, if that's your choice, I support it, right? But I really like to see people just get real with themselves and just own it. You got to own the situations. They say acceptance, right? You just got to accept the situation. This is where you're at, and you're either make a change or you're not, right? And yeah.
I remember the first kind of, I don't know, come to Jesus moment with my businesses. We had acquired a bunch of smaller companies, but we acquired a large one and we were up
Mm,
to, I think, about 50 employees, something like that. And we had a picnic
nice.
and, we had a picnic at 'em, and then employees were bringing their kids and grandkids. And I just remember meeting some of
Mm,
them, think to myself, what have I done here? This little business I started in my father's garage now
yeah.
affects grandkids. I mean,
Mhm.
I've really got to get serious here. I mean, of course, it's a serious business by then.
Yeah.
Revenue was millions at the point, but it just put another kind of wave of responsibility on me. And it's
Yeah.
right then where I joined a peer group. I adopted EOS. Did these kinds of
Hmm.
things to stabilize and just, and so for a lot of those MSPs who just, you mentioned before, they can come and go. When I started my business, my friends were like, "Oh, it must be nice. You don't have a boss." And, I got more bosses than I've ever had in my life. Don't ever start a business thinking you won't have any bosses, so it's interesting as we talk to these MSPs and small businesses. You're right. Just to kind of have a reality check, think about what you want, think about where you want to go.
Hmm.
It's a big thing. It's a big big I seen some sad things, Adam, right? Some of
Yeah.
these, we bought one company, and the previous owner, halfway through, he had a year engagement to stay with us, do
Hmm.
sales. Halfway through, he decided he didn't want to sell. And it was very
Mm.
sad, and he
Oh,
wanted
yeah.
to take over the whole organization again. And you have to have these reality checks. And I know one
Yeah.
thing I talked to you about was another concept of, once they decide to sell, they kind of take their foot off the pedal a little bit.
Oh, yeah.
And then during kind of due diligence, where they're looking at, all of a sudden sales are decreasing a little
Hmm.
bit, where they certainly can't do that as well. It's the other end of the spectrum.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, even before then, like, I mean, just to even zoom back, like M&A, at least in the MSP space, is this shiny object, right?
Yeah.
And for these guys and gals that we're talking about, where they're frustrated, right? They've done everything out there to try to grow their business. They've done so for years. They're frustrated, and then this whole new thing comes out of left field, M&A,
Mm,
right? And it's a distraction, but a welcome one, right? Hey, it's kind of exciting. They see people monetizing this business that they've built. Their peers are winning, right? And they're like, I want to win too,
mm,
and right, they can feel it in the air. And you're right, they end up unfortunately becoming distracted. Some unfortunately for too long. And
mm.
in fact, just this year, we actually had to walk away from two deals
Wow.
because that we had been working on for multi-year
Wow.
process, where we built the relationship, and the owners in both cases, um, I don't want to say they took too long, but I feel like they became distracted of, is M&A right? Is it right now? Is this the group I want to go with, right? And they navigated that in the way that they did. And the reality was, whether, I think to say, hey, they got distracted or they took too long, that's kind of a judgment on my part. But the reality is, what it did do is their bandwidth was soaked up with M&A, and what they lost sight of was their sales.
Mm,
And so by taking their foot off the gas of sales, their businesses, which have been growing at a very phenomenal pace year after year after year, finally flatlined, and then actually started going negative because, as they do, clients leave,
mm.
and because their pipeline was dry, they were unable to, kind of refront that growth. and
Wow.
and as a buyer, there's certain financial metrics that are usually some of the very first things you look at, and one of those top things is growth. And growth, honestly, worth more than EBITDA. And
Mm.
when that growth turns negative, that's a big problem.
Hmm. Has there been anything in the last month or so, Adam, that you changed your mind on?
Ooh, that's a good question. There was, there is. And I feel comfortable talking about it because I know this podcast is going to come out in a couple of weeks. So I myself am actually going to be making a career move.
Right.
I'm going to be leaving ITS here in 2 weeks, and I'm going to be taking a position deeper in the M&A industry with an investment bank.
Mm.
And I can't tell you how excited I am.
Really?
Yeah.
Because this opportunity a couple years ago, you would have never considered going with a bank.
Yeah.
What specifically you
So,
excited about?
well, so what excites me here is kind of what I had mentioned earlier. Like, I've become kind of fascinated with this transition that I
Mm.
see business owners making. Right at ITS, in the last 2 years, we've done 9 transactions. Right,
Wow.
9 MSPs have come in, and so I see this time and time again, and I'm watching these individuals kind of go through their own transition, right? That I went through, right? Taking the ownership hat off and kind of going through that and seeing some of the emotions. I'm not in their minds and hearts, right? So I can't
Mm.
say I personally know what they're experiencing, but I see these people going through this, and I realize that there is a lot. This is going on in tons of industries,
Hmm.
right? And I feel like as much as I love the work that I'm doing at ITS, I can only do it for ITS. And so
Hmm.
what appeals to me is actually going to the other side of the table and to say, hey, um, instead of working for the buyer, I actually would like to help the seller. I would
Interesting.
like to help them navigate. And for me, that's the appeal, is I get to be in their corner truly, which right now I kind of have to walk that fine line, right? Build a relationship, help guide them through, but also have to watch out for the buyer's best interest. I'd like to be fully on that empathetic side, right?
Hmm.
And bring my full empathy, my full experience to bear for those sellers who are out there navigating it, right? And for most of them, it's the first time they've ever sold, and it will be the only time they ever sell. So they want to do it right.
When a small business wants to sell, what should they look for in someone like yourself trying to help them?
Mm. Do you mean in terms of like a buyer or in terms of like an advisor?
An advisor doing
Mm.
seller side.
Yeah, yeah. Fantastic question. I think the two most critical things that come to mind, aside from competency, like let's
Mm.
say that you're looking at competent options, right? That have experience, that kind of have those level of credentials, so to speak, is one is and it is the advisor, do they work for buyers and sellers,
Mm.
right? Or are they sell side only? To me, I think that's a problem to have that bias in working
Right.
both sides. I'm going to go with somebody that is sell side only. And second, and maybe even more powerfully, is is this a person who studied about selling business maybe in school or in books at university, or is this a person who, not only in addition to studying it, has also experienced it,
Mm.
right? Because Joe, personally, there's so much psychology and just emotional connection interwoven with the business. I mean, literally, it impacts our identity, right? In some case, it is the unwinding of that, to be able to have somebody guide you through that who has been through that process themselves, so critical.
Mm. Yeah, because you'll encounter people who A may have already decided to sell and then or B are kind of on the fence or C
Hmm.
they don't want to right away. I talked to one MSP this week who said next summer we'll decide on what we're going to decide. So they they didn't even I was just trying not to laugh, but it's
Ah,
like, wow, you're going to meet with your wife about deciding. It's kind of interesting. So you're going to have
yeah.
like kind of three areas there, and you got just very different conversations with each of them, right? Because got to hear their story.
Yeah, you mean like the different people that are involved, like the
Yeah,
true decision
when they're
makers?
looking to an advisor like yourself to represent them as a seller,
Oh yeah.
because they don't know the best interest, they don't know what they don't want.
Cor-
Some have an idea, and
Yes.
then of course there's those Adam that think that their company's worth a lot more than it is.
Oh yeah. It's common. Like, look, everybody thinks their baby's the cutest, right?
Yes.
Naturally, um, they don't know what they don't know, and in a lot of cases, they I think have failed to think through thoroughly what is next, right? What's
Mm,
the game plan? What's it going to look like? Even if, let's say, whether you're retiring, right? What does that look like for you? Or if you're getting involved with a second bite of the apple situation, what does that look like for you, right? And then I relate it to this, just like getting married or having a child. You can read all the books, you can talk to all the people, but the reality is the only way to truly understand it and experience it is to go through it.
mm,
But my view is that as an advisor, having somebody there that has been through that, so critical. And the way I look at it is, you know, people think about climbing Mount Everest, and it is very common that people will hire a Sherpa, right? Somebody that has been up that mountain a
yeah.
hundred times, right? And their job isn't to do the hike for you, but what their job is to keep you safe, to
Mm,
help guide you, right? Kind of lick their finger, put it in the wind. Hey, you know what? The wind's blowing this way. We're going to take a time out for 20 minutes. Or hey, watch for this crevasse over here. Watch out for this chasm over here. Or hey, you know what? The weather's fantastic. We got to push, and we got to push now, right? We got to
mm.
make that summit. And so having that person, that Sherpa, to help guide them, I mean, that it can make the difference between a successful and a failed transaction.
Much like the gentleman who was in tandem with you when you skydove.
Yeah, yeah, no, that's a fantastic point. I mean, he literally, we were literally on the ride together,
Yeah.
chained to each other.
Yeah.
But he, in his professionalism, he kept me literally safe, not a scratch on
Hmm.
me.
Hmm.
Um, but it was a little bit of a frightening, fun experience. I'll pair those both together,
Hmm.
and yeah, but he got me through it, and in such a way that I had so
That's
much
right.
trust. I wanted to go up with
Go
him the
back
second
again.
time.
Yeah.
Didn't even
Yeah.
question it.
Yeah. That's wonderful. So, like yourself, Adam,
Hmm.
when you were in that body of water and you saw
Yeah.
your family and you got to shore to kind of your moment that you made this large pivot in your life. I
Hmm.
had something similar where
Hmm.
I started my business in the 90s. I'm a little bit older than you, and got myself up to 340 pounds, just neglect, just eating poorly, like you said you were, and not
Yeah.
exercising. And doctor says to me, if I don't lose the weight, I'm not going to see my daughter graduate. So my oldest was just born. And so I'm driving home, punching the steering wheel as it's my pie hole, right? Just like yourself, right? I didn't blame
Yeah.
anybody. Although, you know, weeks following, I would kind of slap some of my friends on the back, say, "Why didn't you tell me I was so fat?" Tongue in cheek, because I see
Yeah.
pictures of myself.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
6, 7 months, I didn't miss one day at the gym, right? I like you said, and when you lose, I lost about 130 pounds after 7 months, and you can't look at it
Love
as
it.
a finishing line, right?
Hmm.
It's lifelong changes. Too many people lose
Yeah.
the weight and then
Yeah.
they gain it back. It's terrible.
Yeah.
So people ask me how, and they want a quick answer. Losing weight is, I don't know, one of the biggest issues here in the States, and multi-billion-dollar. We see drugs
Hmm.
and we see all these things that do it. My one-word answer is always discipline, right? I got
Hmm.
routine, I got willpower. That's how I keep it off.
Yeah.
How does discipline play a role in your life, Adam Kerrigan?
Boy, how much time do we have?
Mm, as much as you want.
No, look, I think I think that um, I think when people think of discipline, they think that uh, you know, at least maybe I'll speak for myself, right?
Sure.
It's kind of like this very militaristic, very
Right.
rigid, very, waking up at 4 a.m. and doing that run before the sun comes up and all this sort of thing. I think it's easy to think that discipline is that, right? And it's like, oh man, I'm here and I got to get way over here. That's a long journey. I'm just gonna, kind of step back from that. For myself, I had an external event,
Mm,
right? My near drowning helped shape and uncover my personal discipline in
yeah.
becoming healthy, right? And I think a lot of times, and especially as we become older, people talk about the midlife crisis and all this sort of things. There's these external events that happen and kind of uncover this character within us. Look, when it comes to exercise, I know I'm a power lifter, but I think the best exercise is the one what people will do, whether
Mm,
it's walking, bicycling, even gardening, right? Any activity is phenomenal, and I cheer it on. For myself, my discipline is absolutely my sport, right? I'll start there, right? With the powerlifting, I've now been training was 2024, so 8 years. 6 of those I've been competing. My first competition was actually December of 2018.
wow.
Um, I think it's also setting up my life to support that discipline. So, as an example, I have a gym that's fairly nearby. I have found something that I think is fairly rare: phenomenal training partners, right? That encourage me, that help to hold
Mm,
me accountable
mm,
for maybe sometimes those moments where I'm like, I don't want to get up,
hmm,
you know. Um, Beyond that, I read a fantastic book, Atomic Habits, and one of the things that really stood out in there to me is it goes beyond what people talk about goals. It talks about identity, right? Setting an identity. And for myself, one of my identities is that I am an elite power lifter.
hmm.
And so for me, people think, all right, well, big deal. What does that mean? Well, if I'm an elite powerlifter, I'm going to do what elite powerlifters do. And what
Hmm.
do? I train.
Hmm.
I train regimented. I eat in a certain way. I sleep and I rest in a certain way because that's who I am. That's my
Hmm.
identity.
Hmm.
And so by establishing that identity, for me, the discipline falls from that,
Hmm.
right? And in my career, my profession, I would say there's a lot of the same principles.
That's a really cool way of looking at it. Kind of create your identity, and then from there, it should all stem from there. That's a very interesting
Hmm.
perspective because you are an elite powerlifter. It's very interesting. And so, elite powerlifters should do the following. That's why I'm doing
Hmm.
it.
Yeah.
It comes back to the why. And so it's interesting how you say discipline. I end up talking to like a lot of musicians and I get a lot of
Mm.
pushback at them. It's like, oh, discipline. I'm rebelling against discipline, and it's last thing I want. And then I said, well, of course, but you're a musician. You have command of an instrument. That requires some
Mm.
level of discipline. Like, well, yeah, you're right, it does. But I hate discipline. It's got such a kind of wide
Yeah.
my ongoing thesis, of course, is that discipline is a spectrum of 10 elements. I've got something
Hmm.
that's going to be published next year that discusses it purely, based on conversations, but it's always a great conversation. There's never a wrong answer to it.
Yeah. Oh, I got to get your autograph when I get my
Oh
copy.
boy. Yeah. It's discipline is a very, very
Uh,
interesting, and I love everybody's take on it. What motivates you, Adam?
uh, I love to win.
Mm.
Um, it's what drives me in business. It's what drives me in my personal life, especially in competing.
Hmm.
Um, and and I think it kind of stems from my personal core values, um, which are direct, driven, open-minded.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
when I did the work to kind of uncover those, I actually found them rather quickly, and now those are my guiding points. And so when I look at, hey, what drives me, you know, what is it that I seek in life? I've got the open mindedness enough to pick, but really settling on winning is, I know it's cliche, but I just am a competitive person. I know you know
Hmm.
that.
But when you help somebody
Hmm.
succeed, no matter how small
Yeah.
it may be, that's another win as well, correct?
100%. You're right, and I think that's the creativity that I can bring to the table. If it, I can look at another person's win of saying, "Hey, did I help them? Did I point them out? Did I,
Hmm.
how did I contribute, or how can I contribute to their own personal win?"
Hmm.
Right? And I think that's, and that's why I love the work that you do, and frankly, it's kind of inspired some of my own thinking,
Huh.
about talking with people, and even having these sort of conversations. They can be so enlightening, and people sharing their stories. um, I think there's sometimes we just come across people and we really click, we really sort of get along. And when I
Yeah.
have those conversations with people, I love helping them. I just
Hmm.
love the gratification of seeing them win, right? And I I don't even look for uh reward a lot of times in those sort of situations. Like, as a perfect example, I know we didn't quite talk about it, but this last June of this year, I did retire for competition with
That's right.
powerlifting.
Yeah.
And just this past Sunday, so just 4 days ago, was the World Championship.
Oh.
And four of my training partners competed in there. And so I was doing the lift off of the bench press. I was doing the handling. I've been doing the
Oh,
coaching for them
cool.
in these weeks leading up. And so, was I the one on the podium? Three of them ended up medaling.
Wow.
And was I on the podium? No. But did I have the same sense of pride, the same appreciation for the win when we all went to that steak dinner to celebrate afterward? I couldn't have been happier for them. And I think
Hmm.
that's the difference is, we're all going to get older, right? We're going to have younger people come in behind us. There's always the generation that are on our heels.
Hmm.
And for me, I've been able to find that position. And I think that's why it parlays so well into this move that I'm making,
Hmm.
to becoming an advisor and a deal maker. to help those people get their wins. I'm satisfied. I feel so accomplished in my personal life. I want to see others win now. And so that's what I pursue.
So you define winning, define losing.
Oh, well, my knee jerk reaction is to go with the classic, cliche to give up. You
Mm,
know, um, I think losing is diverse. I think losing is actually okay if we maintain an open mind about what it means for us,
mm,
right? As a kid, I absolutely struggled that if I lost at something, it meant I was a loser.
mm.
I was probably say gifted. I was the best math whiz in my class. I remember in the fourth grade, we went around, we did this little math test. I went and stood by each person's desk, and the teacher would flash a math flashcard, and I beat the entire class, right? And I felt like the best. But then in other things, I was not the best, and I really struggled with my identity. And so
Hmm.
I think losing is okay. Have I won at every single competition that I went to? No. Did I have a blast? Yes. Did I have a good
Mm.
experience? Yes. Did I cheer on others? Yes. Did I lose? Yes. Was I a loser? Nah.
That's the difference. That's the difference between losing and being a loser because you can find wins in losing. I learned the lesson there
100%.
and I won't do that again.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. What am I going to take away?
Hmm.
What am I going to improve? And maybe, hey, maybe I find out this is not something I enjoy.
Right.
That's okay. Look, life is an experience. It's a series of experiences, and just like I happen to come across powerlifting and skydiving. My wife asked me, she's like, "Do you think you want to go and do this again?" And I was like, you know, I absolutely could. I had very little fear, but it's one of those things where like, I'm good.
Right.
I'm happy. I'm gonna move on. Does that make me a loser? Nah. Means I'm a guy that had a fun experience.
Yeah, because if you start repeating it, doing it, it's going to start taking away a little bit. And you're going to start chasing that dragon a little bit. With
Yeah,
that kind of thing. I
it
feel the
can.
same way.
It can. Yeah, and
Yeah.
I think look, everybody's going to have passions about something, and when I think about my kids, when I think about this, and I have a lot of
Mm.
kids, I've got six, uh,
Yeah, you do.
but the challenge of being a young person is that they don't know what they're passionate about, right? They
Mm.
have to try things and they have to fail. The reality is they're going to fail, right? It's the whole adage, the master has failed more times than you've ever even started,
Right.
right? And so we have to, and there's a saying that I really love, that when we're young, we have to commit little and experiment greatly, and
Hmm.
as we become older, we commit greatly and experiment little.
Oh. So, given that motivation of winning, Adam, how do you measure success?
Mm. Uh, it For me, it's an internal measure.
Hmm.
Am I putting in the effort, right? Am I showing up in the relationships and the commitments that I've made, right? Whether it's work or personal, like am I reciprocating for my training partners?
Hmm.
Am I showing up for my employer, right? Am I showing up for my clients, right? Am I giving the very best that I can? For me, again, one of my core values is I'm driven.
Hmm.
I'm just a driven individual, and I can tell within myself when I'm letting off the gas.
Hmm.
And because I'm direct, another one of my core values, I tend to not let myself off the hook. That
Hmm.
can be a challenge sometimes.
Yes.
But yeah, I think for me, it's what does my gut tell me? Am I living a life that's in alignment with my core values? If I am, I'm feeling pretty darn good. If I'm
Hmm.
not, I know I need to make some adjustments.
Will there be a time where you adjust those core values? Because I know you reasonably well, and those three really, really are spot on for you from what I've
Thank you.
observed. Yeah.
I I'm I well, my third one, the open-minded, is I'm open-minded that they could.
Hmm.
I think
Hmm.
what it would be is more of a refining, as a
Hmm.
sharpening, as I become me, right? As I kind of carve away and chip away at at what's less of me, right? Is I, like a perfect example is, I've made a decision to kind of step away from some relationships from my youth, right? Kind of
Mm,
say, hey, I've got limited time. Am I trying to hold on to the past by staying in contact with this person, or is it better for me to move on to kind of free that bandwidth up? And that's a tough decision, right?
yeah.
It could potentially be the same with my core values, the way that I behave or act. Um, and I think in the end, I'm okay with that. I'm okay with evolving. I look at myself as, I want to be this caterpillar who's constantly evolving into the next butterfly.
When did you arrive at those 3 core values? Has it been a while?
I actually, I want to say it was about 2 years ago.
Huh.
There's a fantastic exercise that I found to uncover those. Um, there's a I can't remember what it's called, but it's like this core value game where you buy this box of cards and it has like hundreds of one words, and you start to narrow it down. And I know it sounds like a gimmick, right? Total gimmick. And you're like, come on. And I even went a little bit into the exercise, like, all right, what's going on? How real can this be? And I started narrowing it down, and as I whittled it down, I think I got down to like 4 or 5, and I really wanted to get down to 3. I think a lot of companies and even people, they have too many core values. They have 6, 7, 8, 10. You can't even remember them all,
Mm,
right? But there's something about 3, right? We can remember thing in threes. So for me, I intentionally wanted to be concise, narrowed it down, went through, and yes, and now in the 2 years, I see, whether through luck or just by identifying and knowing myself, the whole unexamined life is not worth living sort of thinking. But those are literally the compass that I use to gauge, am I living a true life?
hmm,
Right? If I'm in alignment with those, and you actually asked me what I thought was a fantastic question when we did do lunch, um, is you said, "Hey, Adam, direct and driven. I mean, that could be almost oppressive, right? In terms of
sure
relationships and
can. Yeah.
and that sort of a thing." And I totally agree with you. And I think, especially in communication, right? Um, I think people can wield direct communication. They can weaponize it. And that's where I would say, and my answer is, you probably remember, is, hey, this is where the open-mindedness comes in,
Mm,
right? I might be direct, but am I doing it in an open-minded and a caring way, right?
mm,
That maintains the relationship, and that's the temperance that kind of brings into that whole equation for myself. Is, am I am I making decisions? Am I communicating? Am I, influencing the relationship in a way that builds it up or tears it down?
mm. Yeah, I'm from the Northeast where we have a very kind of clear, direct kind of attitude there. But
Mm.
those deck of cards on core values are the same ones I use for my company. I mean,
Oh,
when we did it, we all did it all together, and we whittled it down, and we all had. I mean, it's a great way of doing it, and it's just like
hmm.
you said. You just kind of everybody picked their own, and then we put them in groups, and they picked,
Hmm.
and then we consolidated the groups, and you just whittle until you get down. I think we
Yeah.
had 5, and it's just it's great way of doing it, and then everything stems from that point. I'm working
Mm.
with an MSP now where we're going through this, through
Hmm.
traction, and
Hmm.
they have some core values. I say, you sure you want to stick with them? You want to move on, but you really can't operate until you know that.
Yes. Yeah, you've got to have your compass. I
Yeah.
guess that's what I think. That's how I think of it. Is it's going to tell me north, right? And everything else falls from that, right?
Mm.
If I'm in the woods, if I'm in the desert, whatever, if I know north, that's going to help guide me.
And the open-mindedness. I mean, in this, climate, this political climate, people kind of dig
Mm.
in, even know when
Yes.
they're wrong. And I reserve my right to change my opinion on any given subject, given new
Yeah.
evidence. I mean, who am I to, people say, there's 500 or more episodes, that we've done. Aren't you afraid an AI can figure out what you want, what you it can't figure that out, Adam, because I constantly change my mind. How can it possibly?
That's right.
It can't
Yeah,
decide what I would like and what I don't like
yeah,
because I'm very open minded
yeah.
and I can change. How's it going to know? Uh, I really really enjoy our time to get together, Adam. I get lots of energy from you, lots of great
Thanks,
motivation.
brother.
Thank you so much for your time today. So, anybody listening, how can they get in touch with you? What would be the best way?
Yeah. Well, I'll throw two ways out there. I'm on LinkedIn.
Yeah.
Uh, the old go-to, and my cell phone, 702-249-0420.
All right. Very good, Adam. I appreciate it. And thanks so much for your time. I look forward to seeing you at your next
Yeah.
event and continue the trend of driven, open minded, and direct. Absolutely wonderful. Adam, thank you so much. You be well. I'll talk to you soon.
Joe, you're the best. Thanks,
Be
brother.
well. Bye now.
Bye.
Thank you for listening and or viewing Joey Pinz Discipline Conversations. Please share this episode with one or two of your friends who you think may benefit from the episode. Our website, www.joeypins.com. There you'll find lots of resources and you could join our mailing list. Please follow us on all our social media, Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. Podcast information, the video version of our podcast is on YouTube. Please subscribe. Audio is on all major podcasting platforms. Please follow them. And if you like it, please consider giving 5-star rating. Would really appreciate that. Thank you again for listening or watching Joey Pin's Discipline Conversations.